The O Cannabis Conference and Expo returns to Toronto June 1st through the 3rd, and there's still some good booth locations available. This exciting event is free for cannabis retailers and will feature Tommy Chong receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the O Cannabis Industry Awards. For more information about exhibiting or to register to attend, go to ocannabis.com. That's OCANNABIZ.com. Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast. Today we're going to take a look at Aurora Cannabis, the pros and cons of entering into the U.S. CBD market. To help us take a look at that is Katrina Glogowski. She is an angel investor and attorney. Katrina, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Hi, Josh.
All right, so Aurora got in by acquiring a company I had actually never heard of. Apparently, Reliva deal. It's an EBITDA accretive deal. And so they generated 14 million in sales for the 12 months ending in February. And so a lot of these analysts are kind of backing that deal, looking at the convenience of the brick and mortar channel with a limited online presence. And they sell various formats like ingestibles, topicals, rubs. But looking at the consumer CBD industry in the US, obviously Constellation Brands, we were talking offline about them going into Denver, looking to make beverages. And so right on the heels of that, you've got Aurora coming in with this massive deal with Reliva.
Well, Josh, this hits on what we were talking about earlier in some of these podcasts. Why reinvent the wheel? Acquire, especially with sales.
Right. I was just gonna say that, especially with the distribution and existing revenues. Looking at other tangibles that they have, strengthening or making that deal more accretive. They've got senior management. They've got a useful global connections. Obviously, with edibles, I think if you can get edibles into the market, I know there's some people. I mean, you've talked offline about the increase in interest from Asia, Japan, other places over there. So it doesn't even have to be domestically. I think just getting into the U.S. market is one thing, but then the brand and the name and the PR just kind of goes internationally.
Agreed. I think this is a smart move on Aurora's part. Gets their toe in the water in the U.S. market and without a whole lot of cost. Of course, this wasn't free. This is a multi-million-dollar deal, but at the same time, it goes ahead and allows them to acquire a performing, important word there, a performing asset to enter the market quickly. This is a smart move.
So Aurora's Reliva deal, it represented a long time awaited entry into the U.S. following similar moves by Canopy Growth and Kronos and Tilray, but consistent with its commentary over the past year. The deal structure also allows ACB to make the investment while protecting its cash, providing performance-based incentives to Reliva.
And that's also important, Josh. They didn't say, Aurora did not say to Reliva, here's a lot of cash. Aurora said, here's some money, perform. Here's more money, perform, more money. We call this in the investor space milestones. And once you achieve these milestones, we'll give you more money. Yet another smart play. It wasn't, hey, we like your brand, we like your product, and here's $1 billion of cash on day one, and then the brand tanks, which we've seen time and time again. This is a very smart play on Aurora, and I think you'll see that their stock price indicates that.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're coming into the U.S. I think that's a definite sign. We saw some people pulling out, like with Tokyo Smoke. They were going to come into Seattle, and then I think Canopy ended up buying them a couple of years ago and said, no, we're not going to go, across the border yet. And now they are. So I think it's kind of signaling with Constellation and Aurora, you'll probably start to see some of the other LPs kind of extending that arm into the U.S., taking advantage of a lucrative CBD market, especially with California and just the advantages that the U.S. has, taxation and otherwise. So Aurora, to your point about the stocks soaring, they were up 22.8% at 1566 at the time that this was published last week.
My only hesitation about this deal is the big corporate cannabis businesses, Aurora, Canopy, Tilray. The FDA has not regulated CBD yet, and it's just not clear. And when you have big corporate money behind a CBD brand, that just opens them up to litigation, valid litigation. Hey, this product didn't meet my expectations for one way or another, but also silly litigation, like we saw with Charlotte's Web. In the complaint about Charlotte's Web was you're selling CBD and it's not FDA regulated. Well, you knew that when you bought it, so that's kind of a silly lawsuit. But once you put corporate money behind a product, there's a lot of exposure there, and the FDA in the United States just patently refuses to address CBD, and it's a risk for Aurora, but that risk was not reflected in the stock price. So good on them. Yay Canada! You know I love Canada. So.
Obviously, one of the cons, I guess, to wrap that up is regulatory risk. If you're going to invest in something and you don't want another $1 billion write down, because Aurora is known for that. Like, if you keep writing down $1 billion, what you're telling your investors is you're not being wise, you're not being efficient, and you're not giving a fiduciary duty to your shareholders. You're just indiscriminately throwing money around. So to be a little bit more efficient, especially now as revenues are more important than ever, I think one of the cons or things for higher risk is that regulation. Will edibles be allowed in the U.S.?
It's certainly a risk, as we just discussed with the FDA refusing to comment on CBD. Well, they commented, but they won't regulate CBD. And I have, by the way, Josh, seen some CBD FDA regulations being attached to some of the stimulus bills that we're seeing in the United States to sort of push the FDA to address the issue. But at the same time, when you look at some of these risks, Aurora came out of the gate, among others, they were not alone, and worldwide domination. We're going to go into Colombia, and we're going to go into Luxembourg, and we're just going to do a world domination play, throwing money around. This, I think, is much more calculated. The CBD market is simpler than the cannabis market, and it's in the US. It's not such a foreign regulatory structure as going into Latin America or the EU, where the EU regulations are really, really difficult sometimes. So again, I like this. I like this play. I like this play as an investor, buying a performing brand, getting sales in the door on day one, and most importantly of all, Josh, the milestones. It's not a blank check, and it's a smart move. And I think other folks should be looking at this as opposed to MedMen just. MedMen's expansion is a cautionary tale, and I think Aurora's expansion, among others, Canopy and Tilray, are a little bit more measured, and especially now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe they weren't as measured as they are now. But this is a good sign, and it's showing that the industry is maturing.
Yeah,
finances matter, money matters. It's business.
I think as a combination of maturity as well as economic conditions, you're going to start to see a lot more M&A as kind of money is stagnant. They're looking for things to do. Some companies look better together rather than separate. But I think that's one of the pros, like you mentioned, being in the U.S. is huge. So I don't know what the tax advantages are necessarily, but I do know that we have a lot of people here in the U.S. looking for those products. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Agreed. Good on them.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. I want to thank my guest, Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney in Seattle. Thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks, Josh.
I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.
How do cannabis CEOs balance growth and optimization strategies? What is THCO, Delta-10, and CBNA, and why should you care about these minor cannabinoids? And why isn't the endocannabinoid system covered in medical school? Most people think they're up to date in trends in the cannabis industry, but they're about 6 weeks behind. Learn about what is truly next in the cannabis space by joining myself, Brian Fields, and Kellen Finney every week on the Dime Podcast and, of course, on PodConnects.